Congratulations, you have a dream job offer, but you're stuck on how much you should ask for in salary. Or maybe you've been given a salary range and now you're trying to figure out how do you play this. So today, I'm going to offer some critical advice for negotiating salary, and particularly for dealing situations where your employer has given a range. If you stick around to the end, I'm also going to give you a very special tip for what you should do when you're still getting a no from your employer. And this is a time-tested tip that I've worked with dozens of clients on. First, you get the call and you got the job and you're given either a direct salary number or you're told a range and then asked, what do you think about this? So first thing you want to do when you get that offer, whether it's a dollar amount that's specific or a range, is what I call thank, ask, and exit. So what does that mean? First, thank them for the offer. Whether you like it or not, it's important to show no reaction. Because if you think it's a great offer and you show that, you've tipped your hand and you're unlikely to see any more salary. On the other hand, if you're disappointed in the offer and you show that and you still think you might work there, you've already sent a dispiriting signal to your employer. So a neutral appreciation for the offer is really important. Asking. This is basically saying, I would like to understand a bit more about how HR or how you arrived at that number. You need to do this in the most open, curious, and generous way. Not in a way that feels doubtful or fighting, but simply to understand where it's coming from. And the last is exit. So what I mean by exit is just pre-committing to saying something like, I'm so delighted by this. I want to take this under consideration, talk with fill in the blank, friends, family, colleagues, whatever, and get back to you with any other questions I may have. The thing you want to avoid doing is accepting on the spot. Most employers don't expect you to accept on the spot. They want to see you're enthused, they want to see you're grateful, but they get it that you want to give it some thought. And the reason why I advise this is because in that moment when you're getting the offer, we are too susceptible to making a decision based purely on emotion. So now we're out of that moment. What do I do next? The next step is what I call diagnose. So the first piece of diagnosis is trying to understand what kind of salary range you've been given. Broadly speaking, I would say there are two kinds of salary ranges. One is what I call purely individualistic and generated for you. In other words, they've said something like, well, we're thinking in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. And it's clear that it's simply about what you bring to the table. When you get a range like that, I want to encourage you to assume that you should be near the top of that range. In fact, in some sense, there's no reason why you shouldn't be at the 70, except for the fact that it's likely that one of their interests is to not feel like you push them to the extreme. So the second kind of range is what I call the salary grade level range. So this usually shows up if your employer is, let's say, a bigger company, or maybe a university or a hospital system. It's a situation where the employer has set up a bunch of jobs and then grade levels. And so let's say your grade level is 56 and the range of pay there is $52,000 to $87,000. When you've applied for a job that has a set salary grade level, it's pretty typical to expect that you will start in the middle of that range. And so while you should be as ambitious as possible to be in the high end of that range, it's less likely that you'll end up there. Similarly though, you should be suspect if you've gotten an offer that's below the middle of that range. Once I've done this diagnosis, the next step is I need to think about how can I make the case to my employer that I should be on the higher end of a range. And the way you do that is by identifying your own unique value. In other words, what do you bring to the table that is different from what the average person applying for this job might bring. So what this means is identifying some set of talents, skills, ability, or experience that is unique to you and that others who are similarly situated for the job are unlikely to bring. So for example, if you are coming from a competitor company, maybe you bring knowledge about their processes that would be highly valuable to this company. Now, of course, if you are subject to non-disclosures, that's something you can't use. Ultimately, maybe you bring with you a network of contacts and relationships that will be very useful to the employer. Or maybe you have some unique language skills that you know is critically important as your employer is expanding into the Middle East or Africa or Europe. But the point here is, I want to say, okay, here's what the average person qualified for this job gets paid. But here's why what I'm bringing is uniquely valuable to you. So all of this then sets me up to go back to my employer. And when I go back to the employer, I want to start off by, again, appreciating the offer, making sure that I've understood the basis of the offer, and then making the case for an increase, using that unique value or specialized qualities that you can bring to the job. So let's imagine that maybe you've gotten a few concessions, maybe you've gotten no concession. It's tempting in this moment to say, oh, well, this is it. But this is where I want to stop you, because it is in this fourth step that I've seen a huge amount of success. When they say no, you want to say, help me understand why. And they will give you some reason. And then the fourth step is to say, okay, I appreciate that. What I like to negotiate with you is some kind of earlier consideration of a salary increase. So instead of having to wait a full year, I can be reevaluated in 3 months or in 6 months for an increase. So I have seen this work with many of my clients through the years, that sometimes they're told something like, you made a great case here, you are unique, like we really love your French language skills. Problem is we're hiring 5 other people for the same role, and so we really can't adjust your salary here without causing an issue of equity across the other 4. When I hear something like that, what I want to say is, I totally understand this interest. Hearing it, what I really like to do is we can look at this 6 months from now and have a salary adjustment then at a time when it's less salient to the other 4. I have found this to be highly successful. Now, does it mean 100% that you're going to get that salary adjustment in 6 months? Not necessarily, but getting the commitment does increase the likelihood that you will have a salary adjustment that will come sooner than a year that could be really valuable to you. So to recap, when you get an offer, before saying yes, here are some important tips. First, thank, ask, and exit. Thank them for the offer, ask to understand where it came from, and then say you want to take it under advisement. Second, if you've been given a range, diagnose what kind of a range it is. Is it specifically generated for you? In which case, you should aim for the high end of that range. Or are you being given a salary that's based on a long-standing salary grade level established by the employer? And if that's the case, you should be aiming for and hoping for the middle of the range. Third, before you go back and open up a negotiation with the employer, think through the ways that you can bring unique value to the employer that's differentiated from what most other candidates of the same qualification would be bringing to that job. And when you open up the negotiation, make sure you share those differentiating factors with your employer. Finally, if you're still told no, negotiate special terms for an earlier consideration of a salary increase. So, I think many of us experience these negotiations over salary as difficult conversations. So I want to invite you to keep watching this next video where I teach you how to start a difficult conversation at work. Also, please be sure to like this video, leave your comments below, and if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Okay, you want to know how to have a good difficult conversation at work? Keep watching.